I just want it to be that good.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break, but during the break, you'll be able to hear an interview with Lucas Sullivan talking to David Jaffe about his Kickstarter game that he's helping out with. It's a lengthy one, but when we get back, we're going to talk about Psychonauts, and we're going to talk about the question of the week. So stay tuned.
So we're here to talk about MotorGun, your most recent Kickstarter project. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about it?
Yeah, so MotorGun is kind of the the dream team of sort of vehicle combat developers coming together. I'm coming on board. Some of the guys who worked on Interstate and created Interstate 76, Interstate I-82 are coming on board, and we're all kind of coming on as sort of, the way I think about it is sort of like executive producers on a movie. So this is not the next game I'm directing. It's not the next game Zach's directing. It's being directed by Pixel Bionic is doing this up in Orange County, but we're kind of advising, and the idea is sort of to bring the best of a game like Twisted Metal, the best of a game like Interstate 76 and I-82, and really kind of create the ultimate, car combat game. So at a high level, that's what we're talking about. And sort of as you drill down a little bit, what we're really excited to do is take the best of those games, but also do with vehicle combat what we've always wanted to do in the genre, but just haven't been able to. And a lot of that comes down to customization and giving players not just visual control over lots of aspects of what their vehicles look like, but really the choices of weapons and the locations of those weapons on your vehicle, and how that affects the tactics and strategy of the game is something we really could just never do in Twisted Metal, and it really wasn't that robust in I-76. And so that's kind of the high concept, and that's what we're really excited about.
Very cool. And what's your involvement been like in the game's creative direction thus far?
So far it's been very high-level conversations because, we're just getting it off the ground. We're using Unity as our engine. We're putting it all together. And so as all that sort of foundational tech gets, put in place, our meetings have been more about sort of high-level conversations about what philosophy is and how do we merge, what worked great about Twisted Metal and what worked great about I-76. Because in a lot of ways, those, I-76 and Vigilante 8 specifically was a real competitor with Twisted Metal back in the day. And, they were competing for the same concept, but they were very different philosophies in a lot of ways. And so a lot of the meetings have been about, how do these things merge and how do they fit together in a way where they complement each other versus, pissing off the fan base of both, titles.
For sure. On that note, what do you think makes a good car combat game?
I think two things, really. I think three things. I think, first off, the fantasy. I think, I always say this, and I don't say it to be self-deprecating, to a genre, or not self, I'm not the genre, but I don't mean to deprecate the genre that I love, which is, I've always loved shooters, and I certainly love vehicle-based shooters, but, I always say that we know we're not Call of Duty in the sense that, for us, the idea of strapping rocket launchers and flamethrowers and missile launchers and having guys leaning out windows with machine guns and mounting machine guns on the car, there's something extremely appealing that for us has never gotten old. Even back, I've been doing on and off vehicle combat games since 1995. And so a big part of it, when you say what makes a great vehicle combat game, a big part of it is you've got to capture that fantasy, because there are people like us out there that just think that's still a wonderful fantasy. And a lot of it's about the physics of the vehicles, the effects, the weapons, the conceptual areas of where do you drive. It's not just, even though we've had some really good levels that just take place in a big open field in some of our games, a lot of it is making sure your level design both functions as a great, team deathmatch level or whatever your mode is, but also really feels like you're driving and you're actually having that, fantasy fulfilled. So that's step one. And then step two is you really, the game moves so fast. All the games move fast. Even, 76 was a much slower game than Twisted, but you're still moving quicker, than most players are used to moving, like in a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty. And so it's really about making sure that even though that speed is there and the sort of chaos of battle is coming at you from all directions, there absolutely has to be depth and there has to be tactics. Otherwise, it's just too one note. And one of the biggest failures I always think Twisted Metal had was just we moved so fast that we had the hardest time communicating a great deal of depth that was in the game to as many people as we wanted to. And so I love about this game that we are going to be we're still putting in enough of the arcade physics that it's we're not making a simulation, but it's going to be a little slower, I think. I think we're going to do more directional damage and sort of damage to parts of your car. And so if you find, if you sort of work your way up and unlock this awesome flamethrower, and you mount that, on the front side panel, left side panel, it's not just that you want to protect the left side of your car maybe because you put more armor on it, but it's also, you don't want to lose that, almost like a Mech Warrior. You don't want to lose that front side panel because you also lose your gun. And so I think having that sort of tactical and strategy, and also making sure the level design contributes to that, sort of those same kinds of tactics and strategies, I think that's sort of the sort of guts and foundation of a great vehicle combat game. And this time, I really want to make sure that we work hard and sort of what I always say is like the last Twisted Metal, when it worked, there were some online problems, but when it worked, I think it was a very deep game, but we built this real deep end of the swimming pool, but we didn't build the shallow end. So it was really hard for a lot of new players to come in and understand the depth that was there, and that's totally my fault. And so on this one, I'm hoping that we can really make sure that philosophy is front and center from the beginning, and people get that it's more than just an action game, although it certainly is very much that.
Very cool. So, what do you think about the game's design to have only team-based fights?
What I think is that's what we're saying right now, and I think that's the direction. I think, once you have a team deathmatch mode, does it mean it's pretty easy to kind of put in a straight-up deathmatch or other modes that are single players? Yeah, I know right now the philosophy is team, and I think that's smart because it really does build, if you think about it as a class-based shooter, which we are, it really does build even more depth into it. So it's you want to make sure you've got, for example, if you are playing the version of Capture the Flag, you may customize sort of a runner. You may say, okay, I'm going to take a really speedy car, and I'm going to put as much weight as this car can handle without sacrificing much speed, but I'm going to put a lot of it on the back. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm the guy that carries the ball or the flag, down the field, and I've got my back protected. But obviously, you want to make sure that you've got teammates with you that are also running interference. And so I think, again, especially when you're talking about a game that moves as fast as vehicle combat, I think going team-based makes a lot more sense because it's like a spice that sort of enhances the flavor of the strategy and the tactics, and anything that we can do to really make it clear to players that are jumping into the game that this is not just, a blastathon, and after 5 or 10 minutes it's kind of like, I'm dating myself, I don't care, like Cyber Sled back in the day. It's more than just sort of super simple vehicle combat gaming. I think the more we can do to make that clearer, the better. So I'm pretty excited about that idea of team being the focus.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Now, is this the most granular level of customization that you've ever seen in a car combat game?
Well, in design. I mean, who knows? Who knows what? That's just making games, right? I mean, right now we're at the very beginning, but that is sort of one of the mandates and sort of, one of the goals is we want to create really the deepest customization that's ever been seen in sort of a vehicle combat game. I mean, you probably don't want to throw World of Tanks in there because they'd probably have us beat at least upon the first thing that we launch. But certainly for games like Twisted and Interstate and, most tank games and stuff, it's going to be pretty comprehensive as the hope.
Cool. And does it feel any different developing for a PC game versus a Sony platform?
Not really, but I mean, to be fair, again, I'm a creative advisor on the title. So again, this is not the game I'm currently directing. It's not the game I'm currently the lead designer on. So I'm not really there every single day in the guts working on it like a lot of the other guys. But I will say that it's not so much the platform. And the platform's exciting because, I love Sony. Sony's always been great to me. I'd love to keep working with Sony down the line. They're a great company. But, PCs are, especially if you're building a game in Unity and, they're ubiquitous. And it's for the most part, and it's wonderful to be able to kind of, bring a game like this to more people than you could, even if you were even talking back in the PS2 heyday when it was the best-selling console of all time. It's still, you're going to get more people who have access on the PC. So that's exciting. But the day-to-day development really so far has not been any different. And I think a lot of that is just, Unity. I mean, we're using Unity for our new project. They're using Unity for this project. And so a lot of it just, just kind of feels like, normal game development. It doesn't seem to matter. I mean, it matters in the sense that you're not running on a console, but in terms of my day-to-day, what I walk into the office and do, I pick up a controller and I'm tuning a vehicle. So, it could be on PS9 or it could be on this, and it's the same thing.
Right on. Now, do you think Kickstarter is where game development in general is headed?
I don't. I think Kickstarter is. I hope Kickstarter will emerge as a healthy path or a healthy route. I don't think it's going to be. I think I think the best case scenario for Kickstarter, what I want to see happen is it becomes a viable path to fund certain creative products, but I don't think it becomes more than that, and I hope it doesn't become less than that, and I think a lot of people are obviously continuing to wait, because obviously the first buzz of sort of the first blush of excitement over, oh wow, Kickstarter and what Tim Schafer did and all that, and that sort of class that has yet to graduate, and is going to be graduating soon, people are kind of still waiting, and I hope that some of those games or a lot of those games come out, everyone's excited, and then it just really cements itself as a viable path amongst other paths that are emerging and paths that have always been there. But I think it's wonderful. I think it's a really great, a great path. I saw something funny. I think it was on NeoGAF or it was in the comments on the Kickstarter. I don't remember, but I saw it today, and somebody was talking about, well, I really like this, but I'm not going to fund this because this could get funded through traditional channels. And I thought that was really weird for a few reasons. One is, it really, I mean, who knows? Maybe it could. Maybe there's a publisher out there who's like, I really want to fund a car combat game. But, car combat, in its heyday, was never the #1 game of the year. It's always been sort of a niche of a niche. And so certainly with games being more expensive now, I don't know if I could walk into Activision or even Sony or Microsoft and say, hey, we want to make a car combat game, so, and they'd say, yeah, here's the money you need. I don't know if that's accurate. And the other part is, I think even the idea that, the logic that you sometimes see that says, hey, this already exists, or this game could get funded already in the current channels. Well, yeah, but, let's say the only publishers that you can find to make it, for whatever reason, it's not even a reflection always of the quality of the game or the team. It's they've spent their budget for the year, or they already have a competing game that isn't as good, but they already have that slot filled. Let's say you might be able to get it funded by Company X, but the executives there are shitty, and they don't get the genre, and they don't love the game. I mean, just because there might be another route to get money for the game that's on Kickstarter doesn't necessarily mean that you should go hands off, assuming that you're interested. So but I think there's Kickstarter's fascinating for a number of reasons. But yeah, I'm a big fan. I think it's great. I'm excited to see how people warm up to this concept.
Cool. Now, do you think backers have different expectations than the people you've developed for in the past?
Well, yes, but that's just a numbers game, right? I mean, backers have more different expectations because there's just more of them. When you're working for, let's say, Sony, whether you're internal or external, you've got 2 or 3 or 4 people at the executive level that it's like, whether it's your boss or whether it's the executive you're working with as an external developer. And yeah, they may represent a handful of other voices, but ultimately that's the person that, you don't want to say you have to please, because as a developer, you always want to think your main customer, your main master is your audience, and you hope that the publisher you've teamed up with shares that view. But ultimately, you also want to make sure your publisher is happy and having a good relationship with the developer. That's part of the job. But when you're doing Kickstarter, obviously, yeah, the expectations are different because, it's hundreds of people, thousands of people who have their expectations for what the game should be, and they've already paid money, and you don't want to let any of them down. But ultimately, to not let most of them down, you're going to have to let a few of them down. But, their expectations, I think, are different in the sense that when you come to Kickstarter and you fund a Kickstarter and you get behind it, unless the Kickstarter from the very beginning is about visual fidelity and jaw-dropping visuals and things like that, most people, I think, who are on Kickstarter funding games are true core gamers, and they seem to be more okay. It's almost like you're funding an HBO show versus funding, Pacific Rim or something, where you're really into story and you're really into characters. So on Kickstarter, you see more, that's a really cool mechanic, or that's a really interesting idea for a world that can be expressed through interactivity. And so I think the expectations, even though there are certainly companies, and Sony is one of them, where the medium, the art of the medium is incredibly important, I think on Kickstarter you see more of that. And that's really refreshing, and that's exciting, because you can actually go online and talk to these people who are funding your dream, and you're making it everybody's dream, because they can share in the dialogue with you about tactics for vehicle combat, and tactics for how can we make a map that really shows off some of these strategies of certain kinds of cars and stuff. I mean, you don't always get to have that kind of deep, nuanced conversation with everybody on the publishing side. Again, some of them you do, and that's brilliant, but I wouldn't say as many as you do on Kickstarter.
For sure. Have you met any, Twisted Metal pros, experts that sort of gave you nuggets of wisdom about the game?
Well, now, not yet on this, because we just launched the Kickstarter today. I will tell you that, there's a pretty hardcore Twisted Metal fan base out there, and they were pretty divided on the last Twisted Metal. Some of them really, it's almost like the two Twisted Metals people hold up are Twisted Metal 2 and Twisted Metal Black as sort of being the best ones. And there's the Black and 2 are very different games in terms of how they were tuned and designed and all kinds of things. And so it was really an education to sort of look at the new Twisted Metal and have some of the folks who, got what they loved, say, about Twisted 2 back, but a lot of the guys who loved Black necessarily didn't get, or the ladies who loved Black didn't get the same kind of gameplay. And a great example was in Twisted Black, and this was never intentional, by the way. This was absolutely not an intentional thing. But the hardcore fans picked up on it, which was you could actually dodge a lot more of the weapons than were originally intended. And they developed some really creative ways to dodge not just missiles that are going, 300 miles an hour. They're dodging fucking machine gun fire by driving backwards and almost like creating a vehicle version of a strafe. And we're like, it wasn't until the new Twisted came out that they really tore me a new one, and we're just like, what the fuck, motherfucker, why can't I do that? I'm like, I didn't know you could fucking do that at all. It's like, I knew you could dodge missiles, and we tuned a lot of the missiles, not all of them, but a lot of them, we spent a lot of time making sure you could dodge them. I had no clue they were fucking dodging machine gun fire. And so, so on this one, it's what's nice about it is from the very beginning, these guys can sort of engage with us and say, hey, please do this, don't forget this. And, some of the reward tiers, playing the alpha, playing the early builds, getting involved early, that would have been so great on Twisted Metal. That would have just been a blast to have had an opportunity to do that.
I'll have to go back and try to learn that technique.
Just go on YouTube. They sent me links. They're like, look, I'm like, you can't do that. They're like, yeah, you can. Here's the link. I'm like, holy shit, you really can do that. It's pretty cool.
Now, you personally, what's your favorite Twisted Metal, either to play or the work?
Well, I mean, I'm still, I was very disappointed that there were so many challenges, and I still to this day don't really know why, with the new one for people to get online. Like, there were a number of challenges for people being able to connect and stay connected, and I know it's gotten better, a lot better, but when that game works, I'm probably still prouder than that game, even though I think I would have, we would have had a little more development time after we launched to do more tuning on it, to balance it a little better. But I think at a fundamental level, I think that one is, that one and probably multiplayer and Twisted Metal 2 are probably my two favorites.
Very cool. Now, do you think the appeal of Twisted Metal for a lot of people is the character backgrounds?
I I will tell you I know it is. That was something I didn't know either, which is I knew people liked the characters. But when we came out with this new one a couple years back, or back in 2012, we just busted our asses in the movies, and we spent a lot of money, and we thought they looked really cool. And people started saying, oh, I fucking hate the story, I hate the story, I hate the story. And what I finally realized was, and some people loved the story, some people hated it, but overall they liked the story. They really missed, when they said we hate the story, what they were saying they were hating is, I want every car to have a unique driver like the old Twisted Metals, and now you've made more expensive, hopefully cooler movies, but you've only made 3 characters worth of movies. And so that really opened my eyes and made me realize, fuck, I didn't know it was that big of a deal, and it really was for a lot of people. So I think that I take a lot of shame in that. I wish we hadn't have dropped that ball, but at the same time, I'm really proud of that, because I love that they love that universe. And I always say I would love to, whether it's with a new Twisted Metal way down the road, or whether it's a graphic novel sooner than later, or a different genre, I would love to go back and explore that universe. I think it's a really cool universe.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Now, do you think MotorGun will suffer at all because it's all about the cars and not about the driver?
I don't think it will suffer. It will suffer in comparison to that specific aspect. But I think MotorGun is kind of going after something different. I think MotorGun is really more of the sport. It's really more of, yes, there's a setting and there are factions and all that, but it really is more about, creating a world, not creating so much the world and the story, even though there's hints of that, but it's really more about creating just a wonderful online competitive experience. And that's kind of where, the time and the effort is going, versus characters and things. So, it won't have as much of that by any means, but, hopefully players will know that going in, and they'll know that what they are getting is going to be just sublime.
Very cool. Now, how did you first come up with the idea with sort of fighting game style special moves or attacks in Twisted Metal? It's not so much a long story. It's kind of convoluted. So originally, basically the fast version is, if you go back to Twisted 1, we knew we wanted stuff. We were very inspired by Doom and Mario Kart Battle Mode, but also Mortal Kombat. And so we had like freeze rays, or a freeze attack in 1, and we had like spikes you could drop, not spikes, but like bounce pads you could drop behind you, and we had these fantasies which never came to fruition of, you're chasing me and I drop a bounce pad and you pop over me and now you're in my line of sight and I can destroy you. And that happens like once every 10,000 games or something, But so with the second one, we said, well, we can't really make these pickups. We need to make sure these players have more access to these fundamentals all the time. And so for a long time, we had them mapped to L1, L2, R1, R2. So it was kind of more of a Mario Kart, like you had, it was kind of like Mario Kart with 4 weapons online at one time. And so whatever you picked up went into one of those slots, and we figured, okay, that's a lot quicker. It still didn't feel quite right, and there was a designer, who's now a photographer, but he was a designer on the game, a guy named Hunter Luisi, who said, hey, let's do Mortal Kombat-like moves and Street Fighter-like moves. And we said, there's no way. You can't do that with Mortal Kombat. And he's just like, no, trust me. And we were all making fun of him, telling me he was an idiot. And lo and behold, he was absolutely right, and it worked great. And that's sort of how those moves kind of came online. And then obviously with the new one, we had enough buttons to just make it a button, which I think takes away some of the skill, but it's a lot, most people seem to love the new one a lot better, that you just tap a button and you press the directional pad. A lot more intuitive, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think Next Gen can do for the car combat genre?
Like, you mean console?
Yeah. Or just, later down the line PC.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not a, I definitely, well, let me think. I'm not the world's biggest, like, I would say, not all by any means, but a lot, if you strip away the visual fidelity and you strip away sort of the drama of presentation of a lot of games, great games today could have been made 20 years ago, or at least back in PS1 era, right? Obviously, you couldn't make Skyrim without lots and lots and lots and lots of load screens and stuff. I get the difference, but I think,
for me, vehicle combat, like if somebody says, hey, you can play vehicle combat in Oculus Rift and you won't get sick, I think that's exciting. But just, better graphics, better physics are great. But I don't salivate at the, I'm still thinking there's a lot to do just at a core fundamental game design level in terms of weapon design and defensive driving and customization and all that's the stuff that we're putting in here. And that's less about next gen, and that's just more about, the philosophy of the design. So, it's not a great, sexy answer, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, sure. Now, what do you think has been the most significant shift in just video games in general since 1995?
Well, so assume if you're starting at 95 and we had 3D, 3D, going from 2D to 3D was obviously a huge shift. Probably just online. I don't think every game should be online by any means, and I think it's unfortunate that every game has to be these days. But obviously, that's been a significant, change that I think has been a really positive change for the most part. Is a lot more, is bringing online and connectivity and being able to share your creations and things with people like in a game like Minecraft and whatnot. I would say probably online.
Very cool. And I'll ask you a few sort of lightning round questions now.
Sure.
Xbox One, PS4, or both?
Both.
Okay. Who would win in a fight between you and the Interstate 76 creator, Zach Norman?
I would.
Any reason why?
I've never met anybody on the planet more tenacious than I am. So he could best me when it comes to strength and size and even weaponry. But unless I'm dead, I'll keep getting back up.
Cool Hand Luke style. Very nice.
Right.
Who would win in a fight between Sweet Tooth and Kratos?
Probably. Geez, that's a hard one. That's like which one of my kids is better. Here's what I think. I think ultimately, believe it or not, ultimately Sweet Tooth would win.
Oh, wow.
I think Kratos absolutely beats. It's kind of like me and Zach, right? It's kind of Kratos beats him in every way when it comes to weapons and skills, and he's a god. But he has the most significant chink in his armor, which is he's fundamentally, depending on the game you play, there's still a fundamental human side to him that you can kind of, sort of stick your finger in and twist and poke around and really sort of bring him to his knees. Whereas Sweet Tooth, while Kratos is a god, Sweet Tooth is an emotion. Sweet Tooth is anger and hate and violence personified in human form, and so he's not even a real person. And so, I always look at him more like Freddy Krueger and Jason and Michael Myers. So Kratos might physically win an initial contest, but there is no stopping a force of nature, so that's what I would say.
Right on. And where can people go if they want to find out more about MotorGun?
Hopefully they will go and have gone and will continue to come visit the Kickstarter, where we'll be unveiling lots more information and lots more surprises and videos and communicating with the team and whatnot. And so hopefully just go to Kickstarter and type in MotorGun. I don't have the link on the top of my brain, and we'll find you there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me, David.
No, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about the game. I appreciate it, you guys.